All right. Well, we are excited to be here. I don't know most of you. I don't think you know us very well, and so I think this is a great introduction for us. And we're just excited to be here and want to be here at Compass fully in. And so, if you don't know, I'm Pastor Doug Atterbury. This is my lovely wife, Kelli. We've been married for 10 years. Just a few days ago, we celebrated our 10-year anniversary. So that's exciting. We have two young girls, 6 and 4, so we're not quite at your stage, but we do have some young kids here. And we've been doing ministry together for a long time, for our whole life, since we've been together. She grew up in a pastor's home, and so she came to faith young. She was one of those cool stories where she had a real conversion young in life, and I did not. I was a naughty kid, and came to faith when I was 19 years old, and the Lord called me into ministry very abruptly and very quickly, and I walked down that path and decided to get a Bible degree from Cal Baptist and then go on to seminary, and I've been serving in churches for almost 10 years, as long as we've been married, and my wife here has a bachelor's degree from the Master's College in Bible Exposition, and so she's been doing all kinds of stuff from working with high school girls to working in children's ministry, which we've done for a long time. So we love this church. We're so excited to be here, and we're so excited to be a part of this ministry with you guys. Part of the ministry that we've been a part of for the last 4 years or so has been doing youth ministry. And so we have the cool insight of kind of being on the other end, like John and some of the other guys, and those of you who work in junior high, to see the ins and outs of what parents are dealing with and what the kids are dealing with from their perspective. And so that's pretty cool. So what we're going to do tonight is we wanted to just share a little bit from my perspective of being someone who did not grow up in a Christian home, someone who has worked with youth for the last few years, and then my wife's experience of having a really good example in her home. And so what we wanted to focus on here isn't necessarily real big principles, because we know what happens when you move from having young kids to having teenagers is everything gets really narrow and really specific. And so we wanted to give some practical advice underneath one category. We wanted to give some real practical takeaway things that you could do as parents of teens underneath the category of what it looks like for you to be a consistent model for your kids. And so what we want to cover just in the next few minutes is kind of talking about what does it look like for you to be the example for your kids and how that affects you in your parenting. And so we hear in 1 Corinthians where Paul says, follow me, imitate me as I imitate Christ. This model we think should be reflected in parenting. Because we know that we can instruct all day long, but if we do not model the things that we instruct, that instruction will not be listened to, will not be counted. And this is something that we see here all the time, even at Compass with Pastor Mike, who is constantly encouraging all of us as pastors and the church to pray for him that what he preaches would be applied to his own life, because he knows that the people won't apply it if they see him not walking it out in his life. And so he knows that the first thing that can make it so the application of an instruction in people's life is if he himself has not applied it to his life. And so that's what we want to talk about, is this idea of how is it that you are modeling for your children a good positive example that they can follow in the things that you're instructing them to do. And so that is what we're going to be doing about. So first and foremost, I think Kelli's parents are an incredible example of what this idea of consistency looked like. And so I wanted her to kind of share a little bit of what her parents did, and maybe you can grab some key insights from that. So why don't you share a little bit about how your parents kind of modeled this pattern of consistency?
My parents, I'm so grateful for their example, because my parents, who they were at church was who they were at home, was who they were at Target, was who they were in the car driving. I never saw my parents put on a face to go to church or be around people. And with my dad being a pastor, I've heard a lot of horror stories about kids that have not seen that with their dad, that who they are at church is sometimes different. But my parents were genuinely the same no matter where we were, and they lived their lives with integrity.
Yeah, one of the things that we what we ran into doing youth ministry for so long is kids that would come to us and they tell me about what they're doing at home and how they're getting in trouble all the time, and I just talk to them a little bit about their home life and asking, well, what's going on with your mom and your dad?
Right.
And one of the biggest things that we would hear from kids that their lives were just kind of in shambles, they didn't know what to do, they were confused in what they should do, was because who their parents were on Sunday morning and who their parents were throughout the week were really just completely different people. So avoiding that double standard is important. And I think you see it in Deuteronomy chapter 6, where the classic verse, you teach them diligently to your children, talk of these things as you get up, as you lie down, as you are in your house, and as you go about in the way. If you think about that, what that's saying is everywhere you go, be consistent. In everything that you do, there needs to be a consistency in your walk, because our kids are like bloodhounds when it comes to hypocrisy, right? They can sniff it from a mile away, and anything you instruct them to do, if you yourself are not walking in it, they're not going to do it, right? And so yes, of course, we want our kids to be obedient. We want to command them. We want to tell them what they should do, and they should do those things. But one of the ways that we lose in our effectiveness to keeping our kids obedient, wanting them to walk in the things that we teach them, is that we do not personally model for it. So we think that's a huge, important principle. So what were some things, because you shared with me last night some fantastic things that your dad, your mom did in terms of modeling consistent behavior as some real practical things.
Yeah, it's funny. My parents made it really hard for me to ever complain because they kind of outdid us on everything. My mom's really big on studying the Bible, not just reading it, but studying it, and really pushing us kids to take it seriously in our own life, to not ever say, you're too young, you won't get it. My entire life, even now, we were just at my parents' house last week, and never fails, 6 a.m, my mom's up, she's dressed, she's getting ready, and she has been up since 5 doing her Bible study. And my entire life, that has been the case. And so it's really sweet, because for me, when my mom would tell me, I want you to do your Bible study, I want you to read your Bible and be consistent, I had no room to say, oh, but I'm tired, or I don't want to, because my mom did it every single day, and I saw it. Every morning I got up, I saw her Bible open, I saw her pens and her concordances open. She lived it for me.
And how did that affect you, though? Because you did some pretty intense Bible studies when you were a teenager that a lot of people think that you can't do as a teenager, but you did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. My brother and I, she sat us down. I was actually, I think, 11, and my brother's younger than I was, and she's like, okay, we're going to learn how to do inductive Bible study. And she gave us our colored pencils and and we had little binders, and we learned how to use concordances and look up words. And it's funny because my personality, I loved school and homework and pencil boxes, and and my brother was just kicking and screaming, didn't want to do it. But what ended up happening was, through the years, we learned how to study our Bible. She made us listen to sermons and take notes. We learned how to love the Word, and I think the fruit of it has been really cool. To this day, there's a love for the Word that I feel like my mom taught me because she modeled it. And my brother, even, he's a pastor himself now up in Oregon, and still uses the things that my mom taught us how to do when we were kids.
So you talked briefly about complaining, right? Which, does anybody have an issue here with a teenager that complains? Anybody? So I know this is true for her family, but it's so true that we tend to be complainers, and we have a little bit of a double standard for when it comes to our children complaining and us complaining. Like we like to call it venting, or we say, well, I need to talk about my difficult day at work. And so we get frustrated with our kids complaining, but we don't realize that when we walk in the door, the first thing out of our mouth is how difficult our day was and how hard things were. And she had this great model where that never was the case. Dad never came home and complained about his job, complained about how hard work was. And I think if you really drive that down into just practical things about what it looks like for you as a parent to have your kid not complain, if you're not walking in the door complaining about how tired you are, complaining about how hard your day was, your kid's going to be less inclined, I think, to to complain about how much schoolwork they do or how busy they are. So much of what our kids get from us is received by our own example, and I think that that's something that we have to evaluate on a regular basis. So my favorite thing that you shared with me was your parents were big at serving other people. That was a huge thing. They were always big at serving other people, and they modeled that for you and had that expectation for you. So what were some ways they modeled that?
Yeah, my dad, I have this one memory in particular. He had this thing about our neighbor's trash cans, and it was like his mission. Every week, he wanted to beat the neighbor to go get the neighbor's trash cans and pull them out for him. And I'll never forget, we're leaving, I think we're going to school, or I don't remember what we were doing, and my dad slams the car in reverse, goes, "Oh yeah," and reverses, because he actually got to beat the neighbor and pull his trash cans out for him. And just little things like that, where he was eager to look for ways to show our neighbors that he loved them. And I lived in Lake Arrowhead, which is a bummer if you don't like snow, but my dad was like the snowblower master. He put the snowblower in his truck, and he would just drive and snow blow people's houses for them, and just really enjoyed it. He didn't complain, and to me, there's nothing worse than shoveling or snow blowing or being in the snow. And so he was a model at that for me, for all of us. There was no complaining. It was just, what can we do to help?
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, in their house, her sister's 9 years younger than them, so I got to kind of watch them raise. I was around for her sister's teenage years. And one of the things that they did, which was always impressive to me, is that they didn't treat the rules of the home like they were rules of the home. And what I mean by that is that anything that they wouldn't do, their kids wouldn't do. So it wasn't like, hey, we can do these things and you can't. It wasn't that kind of standard. It was, we together as a family. How did you phrase it yesterday? We're honoring Christ together.
Yeah, my parents, they obviously had rules. It wasn't like our home was, there's no rules, we just want to do this together. But there were obviously rules and standards, but my parents talked all the time, every single day, about Christ is our life. What we do for Christ because he's our life. And so I felt like as a kid, it was always mom and dad doing what they did because we love the Lord, this is what we do, this is how we live, and we want you to love the Lord. And so one day when you accept Christ, we'll link arms and we'll all do this together. We're all going to live for Christ together. It was encouraging in that way, because it wasn't just, these are my rules, don't cross them. It was, this is what we do because we love the Lord, and we want you to do it with us. So I felt a sense of camaraderie, even with my family, that we were all in it together, if that makes sense. So little things like my mom's little slogan that she says, even now, she told my daughter this last week, sin is sin, no matter how old you are. So we all watched the same movies. There was no double standard. If there was something inappropriate in a movie, it was inappropriate for me and my brother and my dad and all of us. And so it was just kind of a cool thing that I felt as we were growing up. It wasn't rule-based, it was heart-based. I have this one memory, and this is so silly thinking about it, now, but I think I was like in 5th or 6th grade, and it was one of my first sleepovers, and I was at the kids' house, and they were watching Casper the Friendly Ghost. And for some reason, I was totally struck in my conscience because I don't remember what it was now. I think they said a cuss word or something. And I called my mom and I said, "Can I watch Casper?" And she said, "Honey, I'm not there. I don't know anything about Casper. We've trained you. If you feel uncomfortable, if you feel like you're being convicted by something, you need to make the decision." And so I think I was 10 or 11, and I sat in my friend's room and I didn't watch Casper the Friendly Ghost and waited till they were done. And I still remember that in my moment, in my mind, because I almost wanted my mom to tell me, "No, it's not allowed," or "Yeah, don't worry about it," but it put it on me, because their rules, their training for me wasn't just, these are my rules, stay in this box. It was, we do what we do because we love the Lord. So if your conscience is convicting you, you need to obey the Lord. And that was amazing how that carried through my life when I was in junior high and high school, that standard always stayed the same. It didn't matter what the situation was. My job was to honor the Lord.
Yeah. So maybe you can wrap up this section here by just saying, what was the impact of your parents' consistent behavior in their modeling for you of that behavior, how that impacted you as a teen specifically? And maybe if you've seen it, the opposite with other people, as we both have seen, and I'm sure many of you have seen, but what did that do for you? How did that change you as a teenager?
Well, I think for me, it set the bar high because I watched my mom and dad live what they were preaching. It wasn't, for me, going to school and being surrounded by all kinds of temptations or friendships that were bad, it was easy for me to make the right choice because I knew when I came home I would have a support group of my mom and dad also making those same choices with their adult friends or situations they're in or things that are hard for them. And so I think for me, it gave me a sense of camaraderie with them almost. Like, if I face something that's hard and it's difficult for me, I know you get it because you're doing it too. And we're all committed to living a life that honors God. And to me, it was hugely important because even now, as an adult, I'm so thankful to have had parents that modeled that for me because I'm encouraged when things get hard or if I feel like I'm weak. I'm so thankful to have parents that I can talk to even now and be like, I need some advice. How do you do it? How do you continue to persevere? How do you stay strong? And so I don't know if that makes sense, but there really was a sense of camaraderie in my family. Like we were there for each other. We did it together. We were all committed to honoring the Lord together.
Yeah, and I just think that this basic principle is a big first principle that you can pull down into tiny little moments of application in parenting, where you can almost do an inventory in your life where you say, okay, here's my teenager. I've got this teenager who has this list of issues, right? Here's column A, things that I see going on with my kids. And before you move to the realm of instruction and training and trying to get them to figure out what they need to do and how you're going to correct them in those things, make column 2 of own personal reflection and see where it is in your life that you may be being inconsistent in modeling that behavior for them. Because as I said in the beginning, I think it's really true that any inconsistency in behavior on your part is going to be the excuse that they hang on to not obey, to not follow, to not move forward in their walk with the Lord and their obedience to you and all these challenges that are going on. And so as a challenge, I think it would be good to reflect on our consistency as parents. What is it that we are doing with our tone, with our language, in our complaining, how we enter the room, how we show respect, how we talk about submission? When you come home, are you complaining about your boss? Because if you are, then that shows your kid that authority is something not to be valued or supported or listened to, but something to be complained about. And that transfers directly into the life of your teenager. And so I think that's a big overarching principle that when we're talking about being parents of teenagers, these type of things, they just get elevated. Teenagers can see it. They notice everything that you do that's out of step. And with that, I think this is hugely important. Your kids have a front row seat to your sin. You're not hiding it. They see it. They know it. And we often want to be the perfect parent that just says, I never mess up. I don't do anything wrong. I'm doing everything perfect. But the way that you personally own up to and respond to your own sin is going to be a massive example to your teenager to help them to see what it looks like to have a heart that's soft towards the gospel, that's open to repentance, and that's fully trusting in the Lord for all the things that you need. And so, yes, you can demand obedience to your kids, but if you model it and you show it, that's always going to be more effective. And I think that's the thing that I wanted to get across here is if you want to have effective parenting towards teenagers, you have to be someone who before you correct, you reflect on what you're doing and how that is impacting your teenagers.
That's one thing I really appreciate about my parents too, is they were constantly talking about what they were learning or things that they were growing in. It was a constant conversation in our house. It wasn't like we only talked about God when we were at church or, certain times. It was just this ever-present thing that was always happening. And something that's really, I don't think I appreciated until once we got married and even having kids. My mom was a champion at praising my dad. She spoke highly of him. She always told us look how hard your dad works. He's awesome. Look how strong your dad is. Look how great your dad is. And I just grew up thinking my dad was the best thing that ever happened. And so she made it easy for us to obey him and to honor him, because I watched her honor him. When he came home from work, we all stopped. She had the house kind of straightened up, and we were all ready for dad to come home. She talked highly of him. She really helped us as kids honor our dad, because I really believe my mom honored my dad. She respected my dad.
Thanks. All right, so what we want to do now is we actually want to hear from Ryan and Chiara Hawley. If you don't know, they've had this really great front row seat to the Thrive ministry that's been going on here at the church for the last 13 years. And as much as it's important, as we're talking about, to be a consistent model, we also need to be in consistent community. So they just want to talk a little bit about the value of community and the role that has in parenting. So would you guys welcome up Ryan and Chiara?
Awesome. Thank you very much. Nice. So those of you that don't know us, my name is Ryan. This is my wife, Chiara, and we are the parents of two very calm, mellow, well-behaved young boys. Carter, who is in 7th grade, big fan of John Fabarez, get to hear a lot about him, and Micah, who's in 4th grade, about to start the Edge ministry in what, 2 weeks? 2 weeks. So he's very, very excited about that. But what we're excited about is to start this new ministry in the fall. Let you in on a little secret. It's going to be called Keep On Thriving. Excited about that? No, it's not going to be called Keep On Thriving. It's going to be called Thrive for Old People. That's what we decided. They don't let me decide these names. They don't. But actually, you're going to hear about this more in a little bit. No, but we are excited to get involved in this new ministry. And we're excited to be involved with parents of teenagers and getting parents of teenagers plugged into small groups and interacting and building relationships with other parents of teenagers. And that's what we want to talk to you about. It's the importance of small groups. Small groups play such an important part in the Christian life. The Bible is very, very clear on this. You have got to be involved in one another's lives. You've got to be meeting together. You've got to be encouraging each other and doing so more and more. It's very, very clear. The Christian life is not meant to be lived on your own. And we saw this play out. As we said, we've been in the Thrive Marriage Ministry for 13 years, and we saw that play out for good and for bad in people's lives for 13 years. We saw people that joined that ministry, young couples that came in that hadn't been involved in a church group before, and they jumped in, and they got plugged into their small group. And guess what happened? They started building relationships. They started joining accountability groups, and they started coming more and more often. And what happened from then is they started to grow. They grew in their relationships, in the depth of those relationships. They grew in their marriage, and most importantly, they grew in their walk with the Lord, and they persevered. And they became our friends and people that we served together and ministered together for years and years. But the sad part is we saw just the opposite. We saw people that came in to Thrive and didn't get plugged in. Yeah, sure, we put them in a small group, but they didn't really invest. They didn't get to know the other couples in their small group. They didn't really invest the time and the energy into that small group. And you know what happened to them? One day we looked up and they weren't there anymore. They didn't stay plugged in. They were like the seed that fell on the rocky ground. Right? It had no root. And when trouble came or persecution came or distractions came, they just withered away, and then one day they were gone. And it's funny, every now and then you'd run into them at the grocery store or out in the community or something. Say, hey, don't see you at Thrive anymore. Oh, we don't come to Thrive. Oh, well, I don't even see you at Compass anymore. Oh, we don't come to Compass anymore. Well, where do you go to church? Well, we don't go to church anymore. Because there was nothing holding them. There was no practical accountability that comes with being a part of the small group. That's why small groups are so important. And that's why small groups have, quite honestly, when we look at ourselves, played such an important part in our lives, haven't they, Chiara?
Yeah, we wanted to share with you all just sort of a walk through God's goodness to us as a married couple and just what we have been able to do and how it's blessed our marriage and our parenting and has informed us in how to be biblical and how we are approaching our role in marriage. When we were engaged, we actually joined our first small group as a married couple with a young marrieds group. And it was such a blessing to us because here we are, not even married, just going through marital counseling. And we had people coming alongside us, and they were kind enough to say, let me walk you through the biblical roles. Let me talk to you about some of the habits, the godly things that we have going on in our marriage, the boundaries that we have set up. And we were able from the get-go to establish these things in our marriage. Just a couple weeks after we got married, our small group was attending a goal-setting workshop that was hosted by a mentor couple, and it taught about how to have godly communication in your marriage, to talk about things like your role, how are you doing as a wife or a husband, how to set up plans to have godly parenting in your home, to talk about finances, to talk about how you can best be serving and be plugged in at church. And this is something we do to this day. Every year we go away and we still practice this goal setting that we learned. In fact, in Thrive, we even held workshops to train others. And these are things that were all through small group involvement. As we came over to Thrive, as Ryan was saying, for 13 years, we were involved with different various small groups. And at one point, we had the ministry kind of settled. We had small group leaders for every group, and we found we weren't needed in a small group. So for a couple of years, Ryan and I were not plugged in as a married couple into a small group. And guess what happened? We started feeling isolated, and we started feeling like we didn't have that deep connection with other couples in the church. And we kept talking about this, and I guess we're not very bright, but we finally put it together that it was because we weren't in a small group. And so we prayed about it and went in and talked to Pastor Pete, and we set up an HFG at our house. So we were still serving and Thrive and overseeing that, but we needed to be in a small group. And so our HFG that we put together, we got some people that were in the same life stage with us, and immediately we had connections, and we started to talk about things that we were all dealing with, the same things. It was such a blessing to us.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting because we were leading a ministry at church, but then still, I think, suffering the effects of not being in a small group. And I think that's unfortunately common out there. I mean, there are people involved at Compass Bible Church that come here, but just don't ever get plugged in. And if you don't get plugged in, you don't have that growth and that depth of relationship that you need. And as you head into the parenting of teenagers, how much more important is this? Because parenting teenagers is hard. Newsflash, probably you know that parenting teenagers is hard. We're just getting a glimpse of that now in our own lives as we have a 7th grader. But it's hard because you can look back. I remember when they were young, I would come home from work and Daddy's home. And they could run up to the door and they were all excited when I came home. And now I come home and a dog comes to see me. I guess that's something. Kids are, I don't know, watching TV or doing their homework or whatever. And it's hard because you can look back and you can remember what they were. But now there's just issues, right? There's strain in that relationship with your kids, and that's hard. But it's more than that. We were just talking to our HFG this weekend about it. That can cause strain in marriage as well. As you have those tough conversations and those tough issues with your teenagers, well, that can cause strain in your marriage relationship as well. And there's such a benefit to getting together with other parents of teenagers and to go through that together. Because you can learn from one another, right? You learn that your trials are not unique. And I know you think your kid is strange, and maybe he is, but there are people that are going through similar things. And there's wisdom just in seeing how other parents of teenagers respond. There's godly counsel in trials of being able to sit down with someone and say, hey, this is what we're going through. What do you think? Hey, let me tell you what we did. Let me give you some good and godly counsel. Who's more in need of good godly counsel than parents of teenagers? And then prayer. Right? Small groups are just a great opportunity to get plugged in to the relationships and lives of other people. Pray for them, have them pray for you. This is a scriptural example. You see Paul all the time asking people to pray for him and and him praying for other people. Small groups, if you're not plugged into a small group, you don't have that effective kind of prayer basis for your life. So it's so important to be involved in a small group. But Chiara, how can we make the most of our small groups?
Yeah, well, I'm preaching to the choir here, but we all know that the teenage years are busy. We find ourselves driving our kids to sports after school, all those different activities that they're doing after school. Suddenly they're in youth group activities several times a week, and we ourselves start to just kind of be absorbed into our kids' social lives, right? We're just pretty much so busy with their activities. But I want to urge you tonight to make sure that of all the organizations and activities that you're doing, that you prioritize your involvement in the local church. You need to be plugged in to a small group. God values the local church, and we should value that as well. We need to both be receiving and giving. We need to be sharpened by iron, and we need to be sharpening others. And we can be doing that through different ways. 2 Corinthians 1:4 talks about how we can give comfort to others from the comfort that we've received from God. And we can be helping people in trials. How are we even going to know that people are in trial? Through small groups. We're going to be getting to know people on a deeper level. We're going to be praying for them. We're going to be real. We're going to just have that deeper relationship where we can come alongside and God can use us. Or in Romans, when it says in 12:15, we can weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. That is an honor. In our 13 years of Thrive, we have seen and witnessed so many deep valleys and high mountaintops in people's lives. The things, if you've been in Thrive, there's a lot of folks here, you've seen this firsthand, the different things that people have gone through in Thrive and how you can literally be weeping with them and trying to comfort them as they're grieving, and then coming along and just rejoicing with them at the good things that God brings in the answered prayer. It's a joy. I wanted to talk real quickly about one of the couples I was thinking about as I was revisiting those 13 years, the Zeratis. Many of you at church know them and their story, but just briefly, she went from being healthy one day to getting into sepsis, and ultimately she had her arms and legs amputated from the knees down and from the elbows down. And she had some months of recovery, and then she came, and Mike came, her husband, and the Zeratis wanted to share with us at Thrive, which was one of their small groups they were involved in. They're also in an HFG at Compass. They wanted to share how God had come alongside them and how specifically he had used their small group to do that. Mike talked about how in the middle of the night when he had the news that Vicky was not going to make it, they couldn't find a pulse, he had texted at 3 a.m. his small group members and immediately received prayer, support, responses. Someone drove up to Sacramento to sit with them and pray with them and just be with them. And just through the recovery, when God miraculously healed her and allowed her to live, and then through the operation following, just how people were there for him. And I wanted to quote what he said when he came to talk to Thrive, because how he said it was perfect. It was very powerful. Mike said, "This church showed up like 1,000,000 times bigger than I thought possible. We got a glimpse of heaven, what it is like for the fellowship of believers to come together. Be plugged in. We had so many people surrounding us. The fellowship of believers is critical."
Yeah, and they had that because they were involved so much in church, and particularly involved in those small groups. And everybody in church, a lot of people helped them out, but it was really that small group that came right alongside them. So important to surround yourself with godly believers, because we live in a culture, and we're surrounded by a culture that doesn't believe in God. And you've got to be aware in your parenting, you've got to be aware in your lives the influence that this culture has on you and on your parenting. It's like getting in the ocean and looking up 5 minutes later and you realize, whoa, you've drifted way downstream. You're thinking, how did I get there? This can happen in your life, and it can happen in your parenting. And that's why it's so important that you stay focused on God, and so important that you stay focused and grounded in your small group. Because as we mentioned in Thrive, we've seen this for 13 years happen. We've seen people get distracted by the things of this world, chasing after careers and reputation and money and things that don't satisfy. Or we've seen people make bad decisions with their time, bad decisions with their family, letting the busyness of life distract them from doing what they're supposed to be doing, leading the family the way they're supposed to be leading their family, and investing in the kids in the way that they're supposed to. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to end up at the back edge of these teenage years and realize that you've wasted your time. Such important years in your lives and your kids' lives. So don't let that happen to you. Get plugged in, stay plugged in, and the best way to do that is to get involved in a small group. Yeah, those teenage years are going to be hard. It's going to be a fight sometime. But I always think about this as I think about transitioning to different stages of life, that I'm going to have to stand before God one day, and I'm going to have to be accountable for how I lived my life and how I used my time in that phase of life. And as I think about parenting teenagers, I want to be able to stand before God one day and say, like Paul did to Timothy in 2 Timothy 4, that I fought that good fight. I finished that race. I did that well. And just know that this is our prayer for you as well, that you too can finish that race of at least that phase of your life of parents of teenagers and be able to stand before God one day, be proud of how you lived that life and how you parented your teenagers. So that is our prayer, and that is why we're obviously so excited about this new ministry, and so excited, as you can tell, that small groups are going to be such an integral part of that. Because this ministry is going to be about getting parents of teenagers back together again, plugged in together, learning from one another, growing from one another, and just celebrating the gift of parenting that God's given us. So we will hopefully see many of you in the fall, and to tell you a little more and give you a bit of an exhortation, I'll bring Pastor Doug back up.
Well, you may be thinking, what does this have to do with parenting? Because you didn't give me the tips to fix my kids. And to that I would say the most important thing that you can do as a parent for your kids is to realize that you are the parent and you need to have a grounded spiritual life. And that's why we wanted to focus tonight on this foundation of you as the parent being the consistent model for your kid and being in a community that really drives you and pushes you to follow Christ well. Because when all else crumbles with your kids, if your life and your walk with the Lord is strong, then that's the thing that's going to ultimately get you through, push you up that hill, get you over that hill with your teenagers, and that's what we wanted for you. I wanted to just share this verse and talk about this for just a second. Hebrews, we all know this verse so well. Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. Let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as some have the habit of doing, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. We know that verse because we hear it say, yeah, we shouldn't neglect the coming together. But if you think about what's actually being said there, it's saying consider it. Let us consider how to stir it up. That's not just a thought exercise. That's not just think about some good thoughts about how we can help one another. This is an action-driven word of how we are to devote our full mind and attention to how we can be engaged in the activity of building up one another and stirring on, provoking other people in our lives to love and good deeds, right? And that's what we want to do in a group like Parents United and with the new ministries that we're starting. We want to be a group that provokes one another to the task that we have been called to. This thing that we've been called to called parenting doesn't get easier with time, it gets harder with time, and we need to be equipped well, we need to be empowered, and we need to be emboldened to be able to do the work that God has called us to do. And so we want this Parents United and the things that we're starting in the fall to be the place where you can come and have that solid foundation from which you can grow. So here's what's going on in the fall. And we got some new exciting things coming up. You heard from Pastor John that, not Pastor John yet, sorry, from John Frabars, and that we are going to be moving our high school and our junior high here on Wednesday night. So we're going to have all the parents of junior high and high school here together. And so we've got it's such an exciting thing. I still don't know how we're going to fit all of us here on Wednesday night because we're planning on meeting here Wednesday night. But having the narrow, having True North here, and having small groups for me, it's just going to be a fantastic night on church where it's just going to be bustling with this age group at this range, and that's going to be fantastic. Parents United is going to continue. We are going to do this next year and for the foreseeable future. Every 4 to 6 weeks is when we're planning to do it. So we're going to have at least 4 or 5 of these a year, where we've already got Pastor Mike scheduled for the next 2, where he's going to come in the fall, and he's going to give us some great exhortation for our Parents United as a group. And what Parents United is a group for all parents to gather and talk specifically about parenting, right? We want to talk specifically about parenting. But we also have 2 more ministries that are starting up. One of them, Pastor Hayden is going to be launching in the fall, and that's going to be to single parents. And that's going to be coming in the fall. I'm going to let him give you more details on that when he gets back from his honeymoon. But the one that I'm excited about that we're starting is we are starting a ministry to married couples that's going to be a marriage ministry for parents of teens in the fall, and we're calling this ministry Abide. So we're picking this name Abide because we want this to be a focus on how couples are remaining consistent in this season of marriage. I think way too often when we get to this point in our marriage, when you've been in it for 12, 15, 16, 17, 18 years, or even longer, you say, hey, I've got this part down, I'm struggling with my kids. But the foundation to your parenting is your marriage. And so we want to focus, as they said, and as was so important and Thrive for so many years, and as that continues on, marriages are the bedrock, right? And so we know that not everybody has the luxury of being married. Not everybody has that in their life. And so we want to have an opportunity for singles as well as marrieds. But we're excited about Abide that is starting up in the fall. So what we're going to do is this is going to be a weekly small group ministry that we're starting for married couples of parents of teens, just like you guys. And we're going to be meeting weekly to discuss the small group questions. We're going to break off into small groups. We're going to have food every single week. This is an opportunity, a huge opportunity for us to be able to spur one another on to love and good deeds. And so we are excited to be able to announce this for you tonight, to lay the foundation for why this is important tonight, which is the goal of what we're doing here, is to lay the foundation of the importance of these ministries, of being engaged in small groups. And then we want to invite you to come to this. We want to build excitement for this ministry, to fill up this room on Wednesday nights with parents, not just from inside of the church, but maybe other parents that you know of teenagers who are struggling in their marriage and in their just life, because they're having to go through these challenges with their kids and in their life. So we want to have this open to you. We do have our website actually already up. It's next to our Thrive ministry on our website, and we have a sign-up form there if you're interested and want to participate, whether that means moving from your small group that you're meeting in someone else's house, or moving up from Thrive, or jumping in. We would love to know if you're interested, because we want to start connecting with you guys and getting you guys plugged in to this ministry. So we're excited about that. We'll be around to answer questions. We're still working out all the details, but that's something that's coming up in the fall that all of you are invited. We have ministries for everybody here in this room, so we're excited about that. Sound good? All right. Last few things before we finish off. What we're actually going to do in just a minute, because this is also a foundational thing that is vital for us in our parenting, is we want to just spend a few minutes praying together at our tables. There's actually a prayer card at your table that we've broken down into a few subcategories, and we want us to just end the night with a few minutes of prayer. But before we did that, we also have 2 other resources that are there on the table for you. We have provided for you, because I know it always doesn't get into your hands from your junior hires and high schools into your life, and maybe you get electronically, but there is a summer calendar for both True North and the Narrow, so you know what's coming up. You have a hard copy of that you can have and take home with you. We want you to be praying over those events, to be supportive of these ministries. But there's a handful of things that are on that card that we want to be praying for as a church. You don't have to pray through all these. You can take these home. We want to be praying for families in this church, for all families, that they would be growing together, that they'd be united together, that they would just be trusting in the Lord with all their heart. And we want to pray and support families in this church as the bedrock of how God has established the home. And then we want to be praying specifically for our junior high and our high school ministry, and this new ministry that we're starting up, Abide. So we have just a few things that are listed on that sheet. So for just the next few minutes, I just want you guys to just kind of take a few minutes at your table and just pray for these things out loud, if you would. I'll come up here and close us in just a minute, and then we're going to be done for the night. You guys, kids, get out in a little bit, so you have plenty of time to get another cupcake and hang out at your table, which is very important. So why don't I start us off with a brief prayer, and then let's jump into some prayer time at our tables. Father, we are privileged to be called your children and to be a part of your household. And we know that we did not enter into that relationship of our own accord, Lord, but you adopted us into your family as people that were rebellious against you, Lord. And so we have a foundation to rest on as believers in Christ, that we know that we are loved by you, in that you have paid the great sacrifice for redeeming us, Lord. So we give you thanks for that, that we are united as a household of believers together, Lord. Help us to not forsake the fellowship of the gathering together of believers, but help us to be united as a household of God around your word and around one another, often and regularly, Lord, so that we can build each other up, so we can literally encourage and strengthen one another in the task that you have given us to do in leading our homes as parents. And so, Father, I do pray for all the families at Compass Bible Church, regardless of what season of parenting they are in, but especially for those that are in this new and challenging uphill climb of parenting teams. As they're getting ready to send out their kids into the world, Lord, we ask that you would help them, you would support them. Lord, we thank you for our ministries at this church that are ministering so well and teaching the word and training up and discipling our junior hires and high schoolers that you have given to us as a church. And we want to pray for those leaders and those ministries and ask for fruitfulness and effectiveness. So Lord, we want to thank you for this night. And we just pray that this time of prayer that we now have around our tables, Lord, would be honoring to you. And Lord, that we would come to you fully expecting that you would work great things in and through the ministry of this church and the parents in this church. In Jesus' name.